Welcome back. The crowd of tens of thousands of individuals gathered in a field in Fatima, Portugal. Three young children had provoked the massive response. They were Lucia de Jesus Rosa dos Santos, 10 years old, alongside her cousins Francisco de Jesus Miedo, 9, and his sister Jacinta de Jesus Miedo, and they witnessed not just one, but multiple appearances of Mother Mary. On October 13th, 1917, the crowd gathered where the children said that Mary had been seen, and many, but not all of the attendees witnessed the miracle of the sun. They had come that day because months earlier, a miracle had been promised on that day by Mary to the children. And for believers and non-believers, skeptics, ordinary people, and diplomats alike, the miracle did not disappoint. In the months leading up to this event, the children had experienced many things and had been given what we were told were 3 secrets, 3 prophecies that seemed to have been fulfilled. What really happened that day and in the months leading up to it? Let's look. Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Terror Mama, where I tell you how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and how they took that and locked it away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. Now, the reports of those witnesses that experienced the miracle are in the thousands and varied. However, those variations are very similar in nature. Some observers witnessed the sun whirling in the sky, emanating with colors of the rainbow. Others saw this and the sun appear to descend towards the earth rapidly, as if it was crashing down. Still others saw the sun then zigzag across the sky before fixing back into the place where it should be. Some people saw all 3 of these phenomena, and yet in the crowd of 70,000 people, others saw nothing at all. The miracle of the sun was described as absolutely amazing, and it's been written about by many individuals. But it's the events leading up to the miracle of the sun and the 3 secrets that have held my attention throughout my life. First, that 2 of the secrets most definitely came true. And second, that the 3rd secret was considered so terrifying that the Catholic Church refused to release it. Many decades down the line, what was identified as the 3rd secret was released and defined as fulfilled with the attempt on the life of Pope John Paul II. Many questioned if this was really the withheld prophecy or if there was more to the story. But to know where we're going, we have to understand where we've been. What were the mysterious events that led up to the miracle of the sun, and what did the prophecies really mean? Let's start with a timeline. In 1915, while reciting the rosary with friends, Lucia says she saw a white, see-through apparition floating in the clouds. They returned 2 more times and saw it again and again. In 1916, while playing with her 2 cousins, they heard what sounded like a rush of wind, and an apparition could be seen above the treetops. The children say that this apparition was of a young boy who spoke to the children and identified himself as the angel of peace. He taught them a prayer for non-believers, and the children recount having repeated this prayer over and over, and they appeared to seem somewhat disconnected from reality afterwards. kind of what we would call a dissociative state. When hearing this, I'm reminded of the information that we've previously discussed in other episodes about how prayer and meditation can cause increased data wave in your brain activity, which is known to create a sense of calmness that some may describe as otherworldly. It also gives you a heightened perception. They saw this apparition or being 2 more times, and the concept of praying for the non-believers seemed to be his primary focus. After these events, the children had physical symptoms or felt physically drained and exhausted, which is a common feeling for those who encounter paranormal encounters, or for people like me that do spiritual work or energy work. They also said they experienced total calm and described it as being totally immersed in God. In 1917, on May 13th, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta were tending their sheep when they were surprised by a flash of light and the sound of a thunderclap. They turned towards a cave dedicated to Saint Irene, and they saw a light coming from that direction. The children described a beautiful little lady surrounded by light. She is said to have told the children that she was from heaven and asked them to return to that spot on the 13th of every month. She opened her arms outward and light shone from her to the children, which filled them with a sense of peace and tremendous love. They believed this to be coming from God himself. The lady then ascended. Now it said that Francisco could not hear the woman, but could see her. The children returned on June 13th with 50 people watching. On July 13th, 4,500 people attended with the children. The woman is said to have sent the children another burst of light. It's said that she told them that Francisco and Jacinta would both die young and go to heaven. She asked Lucia to learn to read and write so that she could give out her messages. The gathered crowd saw nothing other than a wispy cloud where the children were looking and potentially the sound of faint buzzing while the children were hearing her talk. Spectators in July also said that they felt atmospheric cooling, and there was a loud crackling that came near the tree where the kids were seeing the apparition. Now, in this July event, the children were asked by the women to pray for peace, and the lady promised to perform a miracle in October to prove to the witnesses that she was real. Now, during this July experience, the children were shown visions of fire and tormented souls, and were told that World War I would end, but a worse, more severe, and more destructive war would arise. And this would take place during the papal reign of Pope Pius XI, who was not yet in place. The children were told it would be preceded by an unknown light in the sky. She requested that in order to prevent the war, that Russia be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. And this time, just as before, she left with a loud explosion. After this, the children were famous amongst rural Catholics in Portugal, and priests and believers began pilgrimaging to the area to see them. Now, Lucia's family and their community called it a made-up story and a hoax, and they were angry with the children. The atheistic Republican government thought it was a Jesuit plot to cause religious fervor, and the mayor of the town arrested the children. Now, they tried to get the children to admit fraud by using the threat of execution, but that did not work. And on August 13th, the date of the next scheduled meeting with the Lady of Fatima, the children were still imprisoned. On August 13th, while the children were in jail, 18,000 people stood near the tree where the apparition had occurred. The people present say they heard a loud clap of thunder, a big flash of light, and experienced again a wispy cloud that floated away. The witnesses say the clouds began to change colors, deep red to pink, then blue and yellow, which reflected on the people and the ground. The tree, dressed in summer leaves, had its leaves turned to flowers, and everything appeared to have a golden hue. Now, the children weren't there to make any of this happen, so it could no longer be a hoax orchestrated by them. They were released on August 15th, and 4 days later, while tending the sheep on the 19th, the children felt the atmospheric pressure change, the air become colder, and the clouds reflect colors of the rainbow. The apparition appeared and asked the children to pray for peace and make sacrifices for the sinners. Now, this term, make sacrifices, came up regularly around these descriptions, and it was later learned that all three children interpreted this request as physical self-mortifications. Essentially, the children would wear tight cords around their waists, they flogged themselves with stinging nettles, they gave their lunches to beggars, and denied themselves water on hot days. They became much more ritualistic after the vision of hell and tortured souls. That really pushed them very deep into the practices. Now, according to Lucia, later in time, the sinners were those who, quote, willingly indulged in sinful activity, particularly sins of the flesh, and, quote, acts of injustice and lack of charity towards the poor, widows and orphans, the ignorant and the helpless. She called the second half of this definition as worse than the sins of impurity. On September 13th, 30,000 people showed up to witness a miracle. In the crowd, there were two priests who were skeptical of the events, but they said that they felt an atmospheric change and saw a ball of light just above the tree that the kids were focusing on. Other people claimed to see what they described as white petals kind of falling and floating down to the earth, but they were like getting smaller or dissipating or evaporating before they reached the people. The lady in light told the kids that she would heal some of those in the crowd that needed it, and she would perform a miracle the next month. October 13th, 1917, there were 50,000 to 70,000 people in the crowd. It was raining and had been all day. Now, witnesses say that the sun, which was behind the clouds, began to spin on itself, and the clouds parted, and as it spun, it emitted violets and blues. For some people, this was the only part of the miracle that they saw, and for others, they didn't even see this. Still others saw the miracle continue, but at this point, they saw the sun appearing to descend rapidly as if crashing towards Earth. Then the last part of the miracle had the sun zigzagging back into place. Eyewitness accounts say things like, from a reporter from Lisbon, the silver sun, enveloped in the same gauzy gray light, was seen to whirl and turn at the center of broken clouds. The light turned a beautiful blue, as if it had come through a stained glass window of a cathedral, and spread itself across the people who knelt with outstretched arms. Jose Almeida Garrett, a young lawyer, said, "The sun disk did not remain immobile. This was not the sparkling heavenly body, for it spun round on itself in a mad whirl, when suddenly a clamor was heard from the people. The sun, whirling, seemed to loosen threateningly upon the earth as if to crush us with its fiery weight. The sensation during these moments was terrible. All of the accounts are pretty similar, and I could continue, but I won't. At this appearance, the lady called herself the Lady of the Rosary and said the war would soon be ending. She asked that people pray for peace. And then the lady again to these three children shine light, but this time onto the sun. And when the children looked in the direction of the sun, they saw various holy leaders making the sign of the cross. As the children were seeing this, the crowd was witnessing the miracle of the sun. Now, both Jacinta and Lucia had private visions later of the lady as well. Francisco died about 1.5 years after the last sighting, and Jacinta died 2.5 years later. Both died of the flu, and they were made saints. Lucia became a nun and wrote several books about it. She's going through the process now of being made a saint, and she was most recently advanced through that process by Pope Francis in about 2023. So now we talk about the secrets of Fatima. The first prophecy to come true was the early and untimely deaths of Francisco and Jacinta. Also, just over a year after the miracle of the sun, World War I did in fact end. The vision revealed to the children as the first secret was of a great sea of fire which seemed to be under the earth. They saw demons and souls on fire. Per Lucia, she says, demons and souls in human form floated about in conflagration, raised into the air by the flames that issued within themselves together with great clouds of smoke, now falling on every side like sparks in a huge fire, without weight or equilibrium, amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. I'll talk a little bit later about the interpretations of these. However, this does ring true with the traditional Catholic views of hell and damnation. Within the second secret, another prophecy to come true is actually the name of the next pope, Pope Pius XI. It was revealed as part of the secret. This is also the time where the night illuminated by an unknown light was brought up. Lucia says of this secret, the lady said, "You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war is going to end, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pope Pius XI. When you see the night illuminated by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given to you by God that he is about to punish the world for its crimes by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and the communion or reparations on the first Saturday. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she shall be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. So obviously, the beginning of World War II, prophecy at Fatima in 1917 did in fact come true. Now, technically, the start of the war was in the year after Pius XI died and when Pius XII began his papacy. However, some of the most major moves that Germany made leading up to the war happened in 1938. The first of what happened only a month after a multiple hours long, unexpected, deep red aurora borealis that stretched as far south as Bermuda and covered from Scotland to Austria. Of course, we knew about auroras long before this. They just were often not predictable, and this one was massive and took the world by surprise. People were running in fear. It caused panic around the world and shut down short-wave radios in some places. So on the same night as the aurora, Stalin was hearing and considering a plan to back Germany in an intention to later betray Germany and essentially scoop up Europe as a whole. Only a month later, Hitler would begin making moves that would directly lead to World War II. Now, the third secret was withheld from the world for a very long time. Originally, it was set to be released in the 1960s, but it was actually not released until the year 2000. The third secret was intended to be kept a secret, Lucia believed. Lucia said she had heard Mary say not to reveal it. But in 1943, Lucia found herself in a bit of a bind. She had been deathly sick with the flu and pleurisy and was being visited by Bishop Silva, who, either concerned that she would die or realizing that if she ever did, the third secret would be lost, he told her to write it down. Lucia was a nun, and to her, someone higher up represented speaking for God. However, she felt very strongly that Mary did not want it revealed. But it's reported that in January 1944, she wrote the secret down, sealed it in an envelope, and had it delivered to the bishop. The bishop refused to open it and told her he would release it in 1960 or upon her death, whichever came first. It stayed with the bishop until his death in 1957, and then it was sent to the Vatican. Lucia would later explain that in January 1944, Mary told her, "Write that which they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand its meaning." Therefore, as long as she didn't give her interpretation, it would be okay to write what Mary had said down and share it with the church. Now, what we have of the third secret comes from the 2000 release from the Vatican, and it says, "At the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand, flashing. It gave out flames that looked as though they would have set the world on fire, but they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. The angel cried out in a loud voice, 'Penance, penance, penance,' and we saw an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in front of a mirror when they pass in front of it, a bishop dressed in white. We had an impression that this was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious, going up a steep mountain, at the top of which was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks of a cork tree, with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. Afflicted with pain and sorrow, he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way, they died, one after another. The other bishops, priests, men and women, religious and various lay people, different from different ranks and portions. Beneath the two arms of the cross, there were two angels, each with a crystal asporium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs and sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. Now, this secret released in 2000, about 5 years before Sister Lucia died. However, she was blind and deaf at its release. The church said that it was fulfilled by the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. However, future Pope Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict the 16th, had other things to say about it. Quote, "The purpose of this vision is not to show a film of an irrevocably fixed future. Its meaning is exactly the opposite. It's meant to mobilize the forces of change in the right direction." 10 years later, on May 13th, 2010, then Pope Benedict said, "We would be mistaken to the Fatima's prophetic mission, to believe that the Fatima's prophetic mission is complete." He then expressed hope that with the centennial in 2017, it would, quote, "hasten the fulfillment of the prophecy of the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary." In 2020, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Pope Francis announced that he would consecrate Russia and Ukraine, both by name, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. He did this on March 25th, 2022, which would have been my 39th birthday. It seems the popes following the release of the secret believed that it had not yet truly or completely been fulfilled. Really, one could look around many countries right at this minute and see this prophecy potentially coming true. Cities torn apart, the holy mourning the dead, and the holy and righteous under attack. Definitely seeing many countries and leaders and billionaires and people who are not living in Christ but claim to be Christian out in the world right now. So what do I personally believe about the secrets of Fatima and the miracle of the sun? Well, the answer may actually surprise you. I won't go as far as to say that those children didn't witness or experience something. It is for sure that they experienced something. But for me, especially for any Marian apparitions, I just don't believe that they experienced Mary, Mother of Jesus. I also don't necessarily believe that what they experienced was sent from the Divine Father. Although I will say the prophecies are true, but there's more to that too. I have some theories as to why the children and the other witnesses may have experienced what they experienced. But first, I'd like to tell you why I believe that this is the case. First, the themes of destruction and fear, hell, damnation. If this were from source, it would have to be very interpretive because the divine does not elicit fear. Secondly, the fear-mongering into worship, the concepts of rituals to Mary as being the thing that will save humanity. Thirdly, the political charge of the message. It was very focused on Russia specifically. And fourthly, the fear incited by the miracle of the sun itself. Many descriptions make it sound like the people who experienced it were terrified that the world was about to end. Again, the divine does not incite fear. I can't say for sure about the secrets themselves, but the apparitions could be explained by several concepts, and although some of them are incredible to imagine or perhaps are even unimaginable, honestly, they're likely more plausible than it having been Mother Mary. During the events, the witnesses experienced some consistent phenomena. The atmospheric pressure would change, the air would cool, and a ball of light would settle above a specific tree. This would be all that the witnesses would observe, but the children were said to have seen a woman in the ball of light. She would speak to them and show them things, while from the crowd's perspective, they were just staring at this ball of light. There would always be the sound of a large cracking noise coming from just above the tree before the ball of light would ascend in a puff of cloud out of sight. These are similar descriptions to witnessing an apparition in a place that's claimed to be haunted or have ghostly interactions. It's also similar to some explanations of people who have said that they've encountered aliens. Of course, it sounds like ball lightning or some sort of natural phenomena. However, the repetition makes it unlikely to be natural. It could be some type of intentional or triggered energetic creation. Russia was a main theme, and we know that the Germans and the United States were exploring all sorts of technology and techniques, and even exploring paranormal things at this time. Of course, we know that energy can be manipulated either through creating the experience around those by manipulating energy fields, or perhaps creating some sort of interdimensional opening. If not by our technology, maybe by someone else's. What I can say is I know somebody who's worked in defense technology, and they told me if you know about it, if they're letting you see it, it's already 30 years old. Holography, at least in its basic form, was invented in the 1940s. The concept of Pepper's ghost, an illusion, was used from the 1860s for stage productions. There's also something to be said for the powers of persuasion and predisposition of the mind to create something in a person's reality that's not really in their reality. Now, I probably sound like a deep skeptic regarding this, and to some degree, I guess I am. I believe very much in miracles, but I struggle with Marian apparitions because they so often carry a message that people need to follow these deep Catholic rituals, and they also often have a political message, backed by a further sense of fear and doom and gloom and destruction. And that's just not the God, the loving Father that I have built a relationship with. My God doesn't reflect eternal damnation for failing to honor Mary or the church, or if Russia isn't consecrated to the Immaculate Heart. And Lord knows whatever the cause, I do believe that the witnesses experienced something amazing. But the secrets themselves need a little more attention. The first two secrets were kept by the children to themselves. Or, well, all three of them were, really, but the first two were. And they were only written down by Lucia for the purpose of pursuing sainthood for Jacinta. And also, she used them to publish a book in the 1940s. So for these two prophecies were only shared outside of the remaining living individual seer many years after they had already come true. The first two secrets were very specific and clear, no error at all. Was it this clear and specific after the fact because it had been interpreted by Lucia after the fact? Or was it more clear because it was written after the fact? But the third secret has more of a Nostradamus feel to it. Vague, flighty. The church said it was fulfilled in the 1980s, but a future pope said it was for a future time. And clearly, Pope Francis felt the secret had yet to be fulfilled, making special attempts to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart yet again in the 2020s. It kind of makes you wonder, did the children witness a miracle? Did they speak to Mary? Francisco could not hear her, which makes me think that the sound came at a very high frequency. And there was also the buzzing reported by previous witnesses. And since girls, females, are scientifically, biologically set up to be able to hear higher frequencies because females hear babies, there may be something to do with the vibration or the frequency that this was coming through on. Does that make the stories more plausible? I honestly don't know. The agenda later revealed to be behind the message, it seems less than divine. Why tell helpless, uneducated children in a field? Why not appear to any one of the leaders at the time that were in this scenario? Damnation, destruction, unstoppable fear, assassinations, and asking the children to practice self-mortification in the name of sinners that they don't know? None of that sounds like the creator of all to me. Interestingly, Lucia's mother changed towards her after the events at Fatima. Her mother did not believe her and beat her over it. I believe routinely. Lucia went on to have multiple additional interactions with Mary, including one where there was a baby Jesus with Mary, and then there was another that Mary wasn't there, but toddler baby Jesus, talking toddler baby Jesus was. And he asked Lucia why she had not followed through with ensuring that Mary would be worshipped the first Saturday of every month. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's improbable. At least that these Marian apparitions came to her in this way. And I believe in many Christ figures and miracle workers, so it's a lot for me to say I don't believe something's likely. Whatever those children initially and later, those many witnesses saw in May through October in 1917 was a miracle. Now, was it divine guidance or a usurper? I can't tell you. You have to search for that part of God inside of you and use it to decide what you believe. It's that still small voice inside of you. But I'll leave that for you to think about. Join me next week when we research whether or not it's possible that humans have had nuclear technology in the ancient world. Although improbable, it does sound like some important key figures believed this was true. And in the meantime, thank you for helping me take the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. I will see you next week. Bye for now.